Welcome to Lift, everybody. Let's all stand tonight as we worship together.
We waited for this day. We're gathered in your name, calling out to you. Your glory like a fire, awakening desire will burn our hearts with truth. Your love is here, and your love is singing. Open up the heavens, we want to see you. Open up the floodgates, a mighty river flowing from your heart, filling every part of our Your presence in this place, your glory on our face. We're looking to the sky, descending like a cloud. You're standing with us now, Lord, unveil our eyes. Your love is here, and your love is singing.
Sing it out tonight.
Open up the heavens, we want to see you. Open up the floodgates, a mighty river flowing from your heart, filling every part of our Open up the heavens, we want to see you. Open up the floodgates, a mighty river flowing from your heart, filling every part of our Show us your glory. Show us your power. Show us your glory, Lord. Show us your glory. Show us your power. Show us your glory, Lord. We wanna see you. We wanna see you. Open up the heavens. We wanna see you. Open up the floodgates. A mighty river flowing from your heart, filling every part of our Open up the heavens. We wanna see you. Open up the floodgates. A mighty river flowing from your heart, filling every part of our
Amen.
When all I see is a battle, you see my victory. When all I see is a mountain, you see a mountain move. And as I walk through the shadow, your love surrounds me. There's nothing you
on my knees with my hands lifted high. Oh God, the battle belongs to you, and every fear I lay at your feet. I'll sing through the night. Oh God, the battle belongs to you.
And if you are for me, who can be against me? Oh Jesus, there's nothing impossible for you.
When all I see are the ashes, you see the beauty. Thank you, God. Oh, when all I see is a cross, God, you see the empty tomb. So when I fight on my knees with my hands lifted high. Oh God, the battle belongs to you, and every fear I lay at your feet. I'll sing through the night. Oh God, the battle belongs to you. Almighty fortress, and you go before us. Nothing can stand against the power of our God. You shine in the shadows, you win every battle. Nothing can stand against the power of our God. An almighty fortress, and you go before us. Nothing can stand against the power of our God. You shine in the shadows, you win every battle. Nothing can stand against the power of our God. An almighty fortress, and you go before us. Nothing can stand against the power of our God. You shine in the shadows, you win every battle. Nothing can stand against the power of our God. So when I fight on my knees with my hands lifted high. Oh God, the battle belongs to you. Every fear lay at your feet. I'll sing through the night. Oh God, the battle belongs to you. Oh God, the battle belongs to you. Come on, somebody praise today. The battle belongs to our Father. Let's just sing that chorus again. Just declare this just tonight. Come on. And so when I fight, I'll fight on my knees with my hands lifted high. Oh God, the battle belongs to you, and every fear I lay at your feet. I'll sing through the night. Oh God, the battle belongs to you. Oh God, the battle belongs to you.
Amazing love that welcomes me, the kindness of mercy that bought with blood wholeheartedly my soul undeserving. God, you're so good. God, you're so good. Oh God, you're so good. You're so good to me. Behold the cross, age to age, and hour by hour. The dead are raised, the sinner saved, the work of your power. Oh God, you're so good. God, you're so good.
Sing it to him tonight.
Oh God, you're so good. You're so good to me.
Oh, we sing, God, you're so good. Oh, God, you're so good. Oh, God, you're so good. You're so good to me. I am blessed, I am called, I am healed, I am whole, I am saved in Jesus' name. Highly favored, anointed, filled with your power for the glory of Jesus' name. I am blessed, I am blessed, I am called, I am healed, I am whole, I am saved in Jesus' name. Highly favored, anointed, filled with your power for the glory of Jesus' name.
Enter this life, bring suffering. Lord, I will remember what Calvary has bought for me, both now and forever. Oh God, you're so good. God, you're so good. God, you're so good. You're so good to me.
Oh, we sing, oh God, you're so good. God, you're so good.
so good. God, you're so good. God, you're so good. You're so good to me.
Cast my mind to Calvary, where Jesus bled and died for me. I see his wounds, his hands, his feet, my Savior on that cursed tree. Body bound and drenched in tears, they laid him down in Joseph's tomb, the entrance sealed by heavy stone. Messiah still and all alone. Come on, let's praise him tonight. Come on. Oh, praise the name of the Lord our God. Oh, praise his name forevermore. For endless days we will sing your praise, oh Lord, and oh Lord our God. On the third and break of dawn, the Son of Heaven rose again. Oh, trample death, where is your sting? The angels roar for Christ our King. Oh, praise the name of the Lord our God. Oh, praise his name forevermore. For endless days we will sing your praise, oh Lord, oh Lord our God. Shall return in robes of white, the blazing sun shall pierce the night, and I will rise among the saints, my gaze transfixed on Jesus' face. We praise your name. God, we thank you for tonight and just another chance to be in your presence. God, to give you the glory that you deserve. You deserve so much from us, more than we can give, God. But tonight, we're grateful that you give us the opportunity just to try again. Thank you for your presence. Thank you for being here tonight. Thank you for sending your son to take our place, God, so that we can stand here even now singing your praises. God, I pray for Miss Sid tonight. I pray you'd speak through her, God. Use her story to move and to speak and to do exactly what you want to do tonight. We love you. We praise you in this place. We're grateful for tonight, and we're grateful for you, Jesus. We pray all this in your sweet name. Amen.
Amen. Well, good evening, everybody. It's good to see y'all. Before I knock this water off, get that straight. How we doing? Everybody good? We can interact tonight. This is Wednesday night. It's all bets are off tonight. No, one of the things that we've seen here at North Monroe is the power of the testimony, and we've seen it time and time again, where we come into a room and life is just happening, and sometimes we build our own walls that we put up, and we're like, I'm not budging from that. Or we just let life kind of sweep us away, and we just get so swept away in it, we just lose sight of our hope. And we've seen testimonies have this power to break down the walls and to give us hope where we thought we had no hope. And so when we come to nights like this, we love the opportunity to worship together and to hear a testimony that can do just that can break down walls. I don't know what you brought into this room, what kind of wall you might have up. I can't be naive enough to think that there are no walls in this room. I can't be naive enough to think that we haven't been swept away and feel a little hopeless. And, one of the things that I guess I'm praying for tonight is that God would just kind of send a storm in through this and fix your eyes on Him again, if they're off of it. And so our special guest tonight is Miss Sid. Miss Sid, come on out. She's somewhere back there. There she is. Help me welcome Miss Sid. Miss Sid is one that we all love. If you know her, you love her. And I think as we listen to her story, you're going to love her even more. I really do. And so I'm going to turn it over to her, and I'm going to get out of the way and let God do His thing. All right?
Thank you. Thank y'all for coming. Got to get the glasses out. My name is Sid. I'm either Sid Page or Sid Jacobs or Sid Councilman. It kind of depends at what point in your life you've encountered me and in what role, but I'm still Sid. I'm still a child of God. I'm an attorney. I'm a wife. I'm a mama. I'm a stepmama. I'm a mother-in-law. I'm a grandmother. And I am a sister and a child. So that covers a lot. I'll have to say this. I have 2 beautiful, smart, caring daughters, 2 incredible son-in-laws. Start crying already. 3 loving stepsons, 2 brilliant daughter-in-laws, 3 handsome grandsons, and 4 gorgeous granddaughters. I'm 62 years old, and I am loving life. But I just got to tell you, this is not the life that I had planned, and it certainly didn't come through the plan or the path that I had envisioned. Now, when I say plan, please know this. I am not a planner by nature. I'm not one of those people that has a list, a check-off list, that certain things have to happen in a certain way at a certain time, except when it comes to Disney World. I can work a theme park, I'm just saying, all right? But when it comes to life, when I say plan, I mean I had an idea of where I wanted to go and kind of when I thought I would get there, and most importantly, who I thought I was going to do it with. So you often hear it said that if you want to make God laugh, tell Him your plans. Well, let's just say that for the majority of my life, I have been making God laugh hysterically. So when I was asked to give my testimony earlier in connection with the women's retreat in March, I really was trying to figure out, what am I supposed to do? How is this supposed to work? Because I had always thought that if somebody that was coming to give their testimony was somebody who is not a Christian, who is in the wrong path, they were living a life of despair and depravity, living on the streets, and then had some big encounter with God, and that just turned their lives around. And I was thinking, well, that's certainly, that's not me. Now, I didn't say that wasn't accurate. Or that should have been accurate, but that's just kind of what I was thinking. So my testimony is not one of a life with a dramatic or a drastic change. Rather, mine is a story of where I was called to put my faith that I profess to have into practice and to lean on God time and time again. Basically, I've been called upon to live out Proverbs 3:5-6. And for those of you that know me, I like the King James Version the best, and there's a reason for that. It says, "Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways submit to him, and he will direct your path." And the reason that I like the King James Version better than the NIV is that in the NIV, it ends with saying, "He will make straight your paths." Well, anybody that's lived the Christian life has got to know that living a Christian life is not easy. It's not a straight path where you know the end and you're going to get there. But rather, I believe that King James had it better when it said that he's going to direct our paths, like a GPS. I mean, we are on a curvy up and down road that we call life, and we've got to learn to trust in God to help us get to the other end. Proverbs 16, verse 19 says, "In their hearts human plans their course, but the Lord establishes their steps." And said another way, also in Proverbs 19:21, it reads, "Many are the plans in a person's heart, but the Lord's purpose prevails." My testimony involves acknowledging that my plans, the plans that I have in my heart, must give way to the Lord's purpose and the plans that he has in store for me for my life. Everybody quotes the scripture from Jeremiah 29:11 that says, "For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and plans not to harm you, but plans to give you a hope and a future." So now, just what were my plans and what did the plans end up being that God had for my life? But before we get there, I need to kind of tell you just a little bit about me and how I got to where I am and the ultimate path that I have traveled. First of all, I'm the baby in my family. I have a brother, Jake, whom I love and adore, who's 10 years older, a sister, Ann, who is precious, who is 7 years older than I am. My parents were married 18 years when I was born, and they were 37, which back in 1958 was really old. Not so much anymore, but back then it was. My daddy was in the Air Force, and because of that, I got to live in a bunch of different places. Mom and dad were both from Alabama, so I was born in Mobile, but then we ended up living in England, we lived in New York, we lived in Nebraska, then Spain, and then Illinois until my daddy finally retired. And so for a good part of my youth, my dad was in charge of what what would be like equivalent of a country club, but it was the officers' club on base. So basically, my Saturday nights were spent dancing the night away with my dad on the floor of the country club, officers' club on base. I was blessed to grow up in a Christian home. Both of my parents were Christians, but they went to different churches. Daddy grew up in Church of Christ. Mama was Methodist. So on Sundays, all of us kids would go with Daddy to Church of Christ in the morning. Mama would go to Methodist church. We'd all reconvene at night and go to Church of Christ Sunday night. And on Wednesday night, we were back at the Church of Christ for Bible study. But far more important than just going to church was the way that my parents had modeled their lives for me. My dad, I was a daddy's girl, and my dad growing up was quite possibly the best human being I've ever known. And, I don't know what the fuss is these days about people saying, fathers are now learning that they need to encourage and strengthen their daughters. My daddy encouraged me from the minute I was born. I can tell you, so much so that my mama had to take on the role of being the Debbie Downer to bring me back to reality. Because my daddy, if you ever talk to him, you are right now in the presence of greatness. I mean, I was the smartest, the best looking, the most talented person that you will ever meet or whoever walked the planet. And there are a lot of people here that knew my daddy. And he is probably one of the most positive, encouraging people that you could ever encounter. Some of the kids that grew up with my kids knew him from OCS, and you know that he always had an encouraging word or a smile on his face. And as an aside, if you go to OCS, and even if you don't go to OCS, stop in. And if you look, there is a brick archway that connects the field house to the football stadium. Read that one time. That was donated by an anonymous donor in honor of my daddy, Lucky Councilman was his name. And there's also, if you play golf and you go out to Frenchman's Bend, on the 8th hole, there is a plaque in honor of Lucky Councilman, and it reads that although he was named Lucky, we're the lucky ones for having known him. And the reason it's on the 8th hole is because that's where he died. He chipped on and putted out on the 18th hole of a senior scramble and died doing what he loved. And it was also the site of his 6th hole-in-one that he had made the year before at the age of 88. So he was pretty special. Now, growing up, I was fortunate enough to really never have gotten into too much trouble. I've gone back and I've told other people, I've reflected on that. Why didn't I? And I know it was not because I was afraid of getting in trouble. And I certainly believe that I don't think it had anything to do with me thinking about even disappointing my parents. Rather, I think that my father in particular showed me that you could have fun and you could be fun and you could do it the right way. Now, even though I was an Air Force brat, because my daddy retired when I was in junior high, I was blessed to be able to go to junior high and high school in the same place. And that was in a great little town called Mascoutah, Illinois. Population 5,000. It was the center of the population of the United States in 1976, just as an aside. But because it was a small town, it was also had a great school system, and so the nearby Air Force Base sent all their kids to school there. So we had the small town feel, but yet we had all of the activities and the offerings that a big school would ordinarily have. So I'm in high school, and I'm loving school, but let me just tell you, I was not popular in that I did not date a lot. Not a whole lot. My friend Amy, who may be watching, and Debbie Shakes, we never got on many dates. But I knew everybody, and everybody basically knew me, and I was involved in everything. First of all, I had to be on student council, right? I mean, it was a great name, Councilman for Councilman. I mean, can't beat that, right? The other thing was that I was in the pep club, I was in the drama club, I was in the chorus. I mean, if it was open, I was going, and I was going to probably take charge, as Joey would probably know. But the main thing that I loved was the drama club, because in Mascoutah, the biggest event in the town in this whole school year was the spring musical. Everybody participated, from the athletes to the door. I mean, everybody was involved. And I was fortunate enough my freshman year of high school I was a postulate in The Sound of Music. In my sophomore year, I was Ado Annie in Oklahoma. My junior year, believe it or not, I was Appassionata von Climax. Yeah, I know, think prosthetics, in Little Abner, and then that one went right over. And then my senior year was my claim to fame, and I got the role of Princess Winifred in the musical comedy, Once Upon a Mattress. Now, for those of you that might not remember, depending on how old you are, that was a role that was made famous by Carol Burnett, and Carol Burnett was my role model. So the fact that I got to play that role was heaven. So what was my plan? Well, my plan was that I was going to Hollywood, right? I was going to be famous. I was going to be the next Carol Burnett. I was going to be the next Lucille Ball. I mean, that was obviously part of the plan. First plan change. Steve Crane moves to Mascoutah, Illinois. He's 6'4.5", good looking, football player, basketball player, baseball player, and he's a Christian. I mean, who could ask for more, right? So I had my sights set. Took a little while, but he came around and we started dating. So at that point, I figured need to be a plan change, right? I, like Lucy Ricardo, and I Love Lucy, had decided that I was going to give up my life of fame and fortune and decide to settle down instead and be a wife and a mother and give all that up for Steve. So much so that 2 weeks before my freshman year of college started, I gave up a full scholarship to go to David Lipscomb College in Nashville, Tennessee, and came down here to Monroe, to NLU, sight unseen, to follow Steve because he had a football scholarship. Only problem was I probably should have run it past Steve first. 4 days later, he broke up with me. I think I freaked him out. So here I am in a place, in a state I've never been before, where I don't know anybody, I don't have any car, I don't have anything, devastated. So this devastated deviation from my life plan, what did God do? Gave me an opportunity to meet that woman right there, Paula Robertson Aiken, who took me under her wing and has become one of my dearest lifelong friends. But just to let you know, my plan did get back on track. Steve came to his senses, just saying. But about a year and a half later, he broke up with me again, and I was devastated again. I kind of sound like Forrest Gump, sorry, again. But God took that opportunity, and he allowed me to be available for a blind date with this fellow by the name of Fred Page, who won my heart. So what happens next, ladies? Fred breaks up with me, right? I mean, do you see a pattern happening here? So I tell myself, I think, what's the deal? And I said, well, I think the problem is that when I love hard. And I mean, sometimes that can kind of cause a problem. I mean, I could tell you countless stories of Fred walking through the parking lot with me on his leg, dragging me, having to be pulled off, or him having to have somebody hold me at the door at the dorm so I didn't follow him so he could leave. I mean, I knew that I was the best thing that had ever happened to that man, and he just needed to figure it out, right? I mean, come on. So, well, a month and a year later, he figured it out. And he asked me out on a date in October of 79, and by November of 79, we were engaged. Come May of 1980, we both graduate, and in June of 1980, we got married. We are back on track, right? My plan is going to go. So we're headed off to LSU for Fred to start law school, and my plan had been that I was going to go to work and be a speech or a Spanish teacher in the high school and be the leader of that drama club where I could just encourage that next Carol Burnett or Lucille Ball. Plan change. I failed to consider that a Spanish or a speech teacher, I've said before, is like a home ec teacher. They either got to die, get pregnant, or retire for there to be an opening. So there were no jobs for a speech or Spanish teacher. So I end up, change of plans, I teach 6th grade in Clinton, Louisiana. And for those of you that don't know, Clinton is about an hour or so north of Baton Rouge. It was a very, very poor parish. No supplies, no air conditioning, no support, and it was very racially divided, which for me, coming from a military background, was incredibly disturbing. I mean, at the base, you had you might be divided by rank, but you were never divided by race. So I was pretty miserable. So much so that Happy Me was crying every day, asking Fred to check my temperature to see if I was sick so I wouldn't have to go and teach. It's a wonder that he made it through his freshman year of law school, but he did. But he took my devastation and turned it into an opportunity, which obviously was part of Fred's plan and God's plan, and that was for me to go and take the law school admissions test, which I did. And so that following year, I joined Fred at law school. So with that going well and on track, what was my next plan? I'm going to have a baby, right? How wonderful would this be? I would have a baby, and it would be right between my junior and last year of law school. I would be able to spend so much time with that baby, so much more than when I was working. I mean, that was just a great plan. Change of plans, infertility. I mean, I am led to surgery, medication, depression. I mean, for those of you that have struggled with that, every 14-year-old that you see ends up being pregnant. I mean, everybody that doesn't want to get pregnant is having children. And I was devastated. Well, what was happening was God was taking my plan that he knew was not best for me. I mean, I had never stopped to pause for a minute and think about the fact that we had zero money. And at school, I had zero time. So he took that plan, put it on hold. And y'all, the week before I graduated from law school, I found out that I was pregnant. So Fred and I both get jobs, and we're going to go to Lafayette. And my plan at that point is we're going to go on and have a beautiful family. And we did. My daughter, Jessica, and some of you that are in this crowd grew up with Jessica. She was born in January of 1987. I mean, that girl is so smart, so sensitive, caring, and funny. And then Allie was born in 87. And those that you know her, she's so sweet and so insightful, and she's so smart too. She was insightful even at a very young age, but she was also a little sneaky and a little bit of a fibber when she was little. Y'all might not know that, but she was. But she got over it. But both of them, y'all, they're my heart. I love them so, so very much. So we continue to live the perfect life. We had family, we had church, we had work, we had school. In fact, one of the parents at Westminster Christian Academy, which is where my girls were going to school at the time, told me that she had sat and watched us from afar at one of Allie's volleyball games, and how she really was upset. Just looking at us made her unhappy because we had such a perfect life. Because see, she was going through a divorce and her life was in shambles. But what she didn't know was that following week, a week from when she saw us at that game, I would get a phone call. It was between about 3 or 4 in the afternoon on January 26th of 1998. And I'd come home early because we were remodeling. We had the total kitchen just totally taken apart. And there was a big visqueen between the kitchen and the living room area. And Fred had left that morning, borrowed our neighbor's pickup truck and put the refrigerator in the back because it was now almond and it needed to be white to match the new kitchen, of course. So I waved to Fred as he had pulled out of the parking lot that morning. So here I am that afternoon and I get a call. And so I answer the call and the lady says, "Are you Mrs. William F. Page Jr.?" Now Fred went by his middle name. So when somebody calls and asks for William, I mean, that was a sure enough sign. These people don't know who we are, so I just assumed it was a telemarketer. But she said, "Do you know anybody in Lake Charles?" I thought, well, that's kind of weird. And I said, "No." And she said, "Well, I hate to tell you this, but your husband's been involved in an accident. And do you have family in Lake Charles?" I told the woman again, no. And then I stopped. I said, "How badly is he hurt?" And she didn't say anything. And then I don't know why, but I asked, I said, "Is he dead?" And she said, "No, but you have to hurry. Do you have family in Lake Charles?" And I said, "No." She said, "Well, do you know anybody in Lake Charles?" And I said, "Well, I have 2 friends from law school." I didn't have their numbers or anything like that. I mean, that wasn't when you had cell phones that you carried with you, so I just gave her their names. So my best friend from Lafayette was over, Shelley at the time, was there, and she offered to take Allie and Jessica with her. And her mama, Lois, was my next door neighbor, and she offered to ride with me to Lake Charles. So we got in the car. Unfortunately, Lois was in shambles, so she couldn't drive, so I drove. So that was back in the day when you had the car phones that conk, conk, in your car. And so I thought, okay, well, I'll give phone numbers to Lois for her to call. I mean, she couldn't dial. So here I am. I'm driving like a maniac from Lafayette to Lake Charles, and I'm calling, y'all, I'm calling everybody I know, everybody I can think of, trying to start a prayer chain. And the whole way that I'm driving over there, I am praying over and over and over to God. I don't care how badly he's hurt. I can handle it. God, you need to know this. Give it to me. I can handle it. So we get to Lake Charles. And by that time, Lois has kind of gotten her composure to the extent that she offers to drive the car and park it. So I walk into the hospital, and when I get in there, there's this lady smiling there at the desk, receptionist, to greet me. Her smile immediately changed when I tell her who I am. And she points me to a room. So I go to the room, and I open the door, and there's my 2 friends from law school with their 2 wives. And I pan the room, and there is Fred's partner, one of his partners, and their paralegal, who apparently they were trying a case in Lake Charles that I didn't know about. And then the next sign, the telltale sign, is I finished looking in the room, and there's a priest. And before I could say anything, he sat me down and held my hand and told me that Fred had not made it. Definitely not part of my plan. You know, the last thing I'd ever plan on telling Jessica, who had just turned 13, and Allie, who was 10 and a half, that their daddy had died, let alone living my life without him. But what I didn't know was that at basically the same time here in Monroe, there were 3 little boys who were about to be 14 and 12 and were 10 and a half, and their dad, Joey, whose mom and wife, Nancy, was experiencing kidney failure and was in the hospital. Now know this, Joey and Fred were friends because Joey was Fred's pledge trainer in KA. And they were exceptionally close because there were 32 guys that had pledged, but only 9 of them got initiated. They were dubbed the Notorious 9. And that group of 9 stayed close forever, and they're still close. I'm now the 9th. But in fact, I think it was the year before Fred died, we had a 20th anniversary for all that were initiated, and all the 9 came with their wives and Joey and Nancy together. Now, Joey was unable to come to Fred's funeral because Nancy was in the hospital. However, even in the midst of all that was going on, Joey still took it upon himself to set up a scholarship in Fred's name at what was then NLU, now ULM. So when I learned that Nancy was sick, I began getting updates from all of our mutual friends, including Paula. My girls were aware of what was going on, although they had never met Joey or Nancy or the boys. And just to let you know, Joey and I were not close. Fred and Joey were close. So in February, mid-February, we had at the end of February actually, we had a trip planned to go skiing with my sister and her family. And we decided that we would go ahead and go on the trip. And we did, and we came back home. It was March 1st, a Sunday night, which was only 33 days after Fred had died, and the phone rang, and it was Paula. And she called to say that Nancy had passed away. Allie immediately jumped in my lap and hugged me, and we cried together. Jessica, she began taking action. She sat down and she wrote a letter to these 3 boys that she had never met because she wanted to tell them that there would be people that would come up and say that they knew how they felt, but they didn't. She did. So here I am with this letter, and I am compelled. I've got to get to Monroe to give this letter to these boys and reach out to Joey like so many people had reached out to me. So I went to Monroe at Nancy's funeral. And Harry Boyd, who is Fred's cousin, was a Baptist minister in Winsboro, but he was also one of the Notorious 9, so friends from college. So he came to the funeral with me. Nancy's funeral was much different than Fred's. At Fred's, I actually gave the eulogy. Now, Allie, when she found out I was going to give the eulogy, she said, "Mama, if you're going to talk, you know you can't cry." So she sat on my lap during the entire service and kept reminding me of that I couldn't cry. And we told jokes, we told stories, we played the LSU fight song when they carried Fred out. His pallbearers fought over who was actually going to get to carry him and who was really his best friend. Now, we went to the graveside, and at the graveside, I invited everybody back over to the house. We went through the visqueen, the dust, and y'all, more plants and more flowers than any one person should ever receive at a funeral. And we went back and we sat down and we pulled out a video that Fred had made, or I had made of Fred the week before at Jessica's 13th birthday party, because Fred, out of character, was singing karaoke. So I thought they would get a kick out of it. So here I am, we're all gathered around amongst the flowers and the plants, and I've turned it on, and he's singing karaoke to the Pointer Sister, "I'm So Excited." And here I am playing it, and there he is looking at me as I hold the camera, and the words are, "I want to hold you, I want to touch you, I want to wrap my arms around you." Who would have thought that those words would have that much meaning only a week later? But it was basically a time for all of us to come together and laugh and cry while we were there. Now at Nancy's, Joey was just doing what he could to survive. He did not visit or speak to anyone before or after, and he certainly didn't ask anybody to come back to the house after the service. So here I am. I've driven from Monroe. I got this letter, right? I was like, what am I going to do? So I look at Harry, and Harry looks at me, and he says, "What are they going to do, kick us out?" I said, "Well, that's the worst thing. We're going." So we headed to Joey's house. We got there, and we found Joey and his family, plus Paula. And I got to meet the boys for the first time, John, Justin, and Thomas. And I gave that letter to Joey from Jessica to give to those boys. From that point forward, Joey and I were each other's lifelines. Late night talks about people who just didn't get it. They couldn't have their priorities straight. They really didn't understand what was important. So from those circumstances, God, I think with a little help from Fred and Nancy, brought Joey and I together. Now, not part of my plan, we not dated for 8 years until he finally asked me to marry him on December 18th of 2006 at Taco Bell with a package of hot sauce that said, "Will you marry me?" So we surprised all of our family on Christmas Day at my house and the prayer before Christmas lunch, saying first that we were going to go steady, and then that we thought we might get married, and then finally breaking the news to him that it was going to actually happen that day by Joey saying, man, if we just had a preacher and a paperwork, we could do it right now, which was the cue for Terry Taylor, Josh, daddy, Allie's father-in-law, to go, well, I just happen to be a preacher and I've got the paperwork. So we gathered up and we came up here to the church that was decorated for Christmas, and we were gathered by 60 people who had dropped their Christmas plans at a moment's notice, and Tommy wore a suit to come and watch us get married. Josh walked me a third of the way, gave me to Jeremy, who walked me the second third, who gave me to my daddy, who gave me to Joey. The girls stood with me, the boys stood with Joey, and Nancy's mama, Lynn, played the piano. Warren and Terry married us, and we used Fred and Nancy's ring. It was incredibly special. So when I think about how we got there, I went back and I remember a conversation that Harry and I had had while we were waiting for Nancy's funeral service to begin. And I was talking to him about, I just couldn't believe how or why. I could not understand how or why God would let Fred and Nancy die. And at that point, Harry turned to me and he said, Sid, us trying to figure out the mind of God is like an ant trying to understand a computer. And I don't know why, but that one thing completely resonated with me. And it was at that point that I realized I had to quit praying for understanding, and I had to pray for acceptance, that I would never in this lifetime understand why. Isaiah 55:8 says, for my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are your ways my ways, declares the Lord. And continues in verse 9 to say, as the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts. Many things have happened in my life where God has given me insight and wisdom and experience at a part far removed from the event that actually took place, and put that and tie that in with an event or questions that happened later on. One example of that was in New Year's Eve of 1997. This is just the December 31st before Fred passed away on January 26th. At that point in time, Titanic had just come out, and it was a big deal at the box office. So tickets were in high demand. So Fred had decided that he would take Jessica, and the two of them would go and eat lunch together and go buy the tickets early. So they did that, and during the course of lunch, Fred had a heart-to-heart with Jessica, and he talked to her about him losing his daddy, because you see, Fred was 13 when his daddy died. And he talked to him about what all he had gone through, and especially about how he had behaved after his mama started to date, and how he had wished he had done that differently. You know, they had never really talked about his dad passing away before. And it made quite an impression on Jessica, because her 13th birthday was coming up on January 19th of 1998. So the Saturday before Fred died, which was after Jessica's birthday, Jessica said, you know, Mom, it's so hard to imagine what Daddy went through. Wow, that would be just like if Daddy were to die now that I'm 13. Little did we know that 2 days later he would do just that. But that conversation that he had had with her on New Year's Eve, I believe had to help her some, and it certainly helped me when Joey and I began dating. Now, as crazy as it seemed, Titanic had yet another role in our recovery process. Our tradition on New Year's Eve was to go to the movie and go to eat after. So during the dinner afterwards, the girls were asking me, well, Mom, what would you have done? You know, the whole thing. Would you have gone with Jack, or would you have been on the boat? Would you have been on, what would you have done? Boat, door, water, whatever. And I said, well, it just depended. And they said, well, on what? I said, well, if it was just your daddy and me, I would go wherever he went. That would be no question. But if it were your daddy and the two of y'all, I would have to stay with you. Now, fast forward a month or so later, the girls come to me and they tell me, Mom, you cry all the time. It makes us so sad because it makes us feel like you don't want to be here with us. God immediately made me recall that conversation that I had had months earlier when nobody had ever contemplated that Fred was dying or would have died. And I said, what did I say? I said, if it were Daddy and y'all, I would have to stay with you. And y'all, I'm not smart enough to come up with that on my own. I'm just telling you. Now, and remember how I told you that Allie was insightful even from an early age? Well, about a year after after Fred died, Allie was 11 and we had moved to Monroe at that point. And I was sitting down and for the first time really talking to her about that drive from Lafayette to Lake Charles. And I was telling her about how over and over and over again I had prayed to God, telling him that I didn't care how badly Fred was hurt, that I could handle it. But he died anyway. At that point, Allie reached over and she grabbed my hand. She looked me in the eye and she said, "And you are handling it." To leave it to an 11-year-old girl to understand what her Christian mama had failed to understand, that God had given me what I prayed for and I just had not realized it. So here we are, we're in the 2000s, and after 2006, Joey and I have married, and we're the Brady Bunch minus the one in curls. But remember, Allie and Josh and Jessica and Jeremy both got married before Joey and I did. But they were happy and they were loved, and my Jacobs boys were doing great. But let me tell you, the funny thing about life is just when it's not a situation where you just have one test or one opportunity to put your faith into practice. There's a movie out there that's called The Devil's Advocate. Now, let me just say this. You need to watch it on TBS because the language and the provocative scenes are cleaned up, but the message still comes through. Spoiler alert, in the last scene of the movie, Keanu Reeves, who plays a high-powered lawyer, has just defeated Satan incarnate in the form of Al Pacino in a trial for all that is right and righteous. And he is flying high. And it's not a second later that Satan takes on a different form and is coming at him with another attack. Y'all, nothing can be more true in life. Satan is waging a war for us and our souls with God every day. And it more often than not, he's going to come at us right after we feel like we've accomplished something or overcome something that he has thrown into our path. After Fred's death, I thought, if I've handled this, I can handle anything, right? What I didn't know was that my faith and ability to trust in God was going to be tested many times over. Now, while it was not part of my plan that Joey and I would not get married for 8 years, those of you that know him know that the man never does anything quickly, just saying. But one of the best things that came out of that is that my girls and I got to spend a lot of time together. It was the Page girls against the world. When they had friends over, I was in the middle of them. When they had their boyfriends over, I was in the middle of them. It was great. And for those of you that have heard Allie and Josh's story about the first time he dated Allie and he called and the only person he ever got to talk to was me, well, that's because we only had a house phone. I think Allie and Josh and maybe their friend Katie Keene were the only 3 people in their class that did not get cell phones till they were 16. It was a great idea, just saying, parents out there. So he had to call the house, and who did he have to talk to? Me. So now, but the same is also true of Jessica and Jeremy. I mean, when Jeremy was over, I was in the middle with all of them. I got to love their boyfriends long before they got to become their husbands. But, both of my girls married young. They were 19, y'all, which freaked me out. But they showed me. Jessica went on to graduate with a 4.0 in 3 years and go on to law school, and she and Jeremy have been married 16 years. Allie, while she changed her major 5 different times and went to LSU, ULM, Troy, and then back to ULM again, graduated on time and went on to get her master's and her PhD with a postgraduate degree of 4.0. And she and Josh have been married 14 years. So I have learned. And what I've come to realize is that it's more important that they marry the right person, even if it's at the wrong time, than the wrong person, even if it's at the right time. Now, and they are the right guys. Jeremy Johnston could not be better suited for Jessica. They are a perfect fit. And let me just tell you right now, God made me Allie Page's mama for a reason. I was embarrassing her long before Josh Taylor came along. So, and Josh, I don't know, but Josh and I kind of clicked. We have kind of the same sense of humor. We appreciate jokes where other people may not get them or appreciate them. And while all of the men in my life, all my Jacobs men, Jeremy, I know they love me, but Josh was the most verbal about things. So next to my daddy, Josh ended up being the male in my life to verbally affirm me, to let me know how special I was and that he always had my back. And for the record, Joey Jacobs loves me, but that's not the way he expresses himself. He's more like my mama. He's going to point out what's wrong, but it's only because he loves you and he wants you to be the best you can be. But with my daddy and Josh, it was the opposite. It was verbal, and it was all about praise. Now, I did this from the time I was born till my daddy died. So when he died, there was a void, and Josh stepped in to fill that in that regard. And there's a reason I'm telling you that, so stay tuned. Fast forward, September 2011, birthday weekend for me. The girls had come in, we're all together, and it was at that birthday dinner that Allie mentioned that she had a lump. Now, my mother and my mother-in-law, Fred's mom, were both breast cancer survivors. But my mother-in-law had had a biopsy on her lump that was returned as normal. But her physician said, let's just go ahead and take it out anyway. And it turned out to be cancer. So in my family, if there was a lump, it was coming out. I had 2 lumps that were removed that were benign. Jessica had a lump that was removed that was benign. So it didn't completely freak me out when this happened with Allie. But we still wanted her to go and get it checked out. So, and now as most of you know, as well as all of America and parts of Canada and Australia through the show, Allie did have the lump removed. But from my perspective, the surgery was on a Friday. And we went and I sat with Josh and his dad when the doctor came and told us that he thought it was a fibrous cyst. So at that point, I had the news I needed. I called my friend who happened to be my secretary, Jessie, and said, send an email to everybody telling them it was benign. Well, Jessie took care of me as she always does, and she put the little, extra language in there. But the final results will be in on Monday. But I didn't filter it when it came to Allie. When she came out from under anesthesia, she asked, what is it? And I immediately said, baby, it's benign. You don't have cancer. Well, we had a conversation, Josh and his dad and I did right after we left Allie. And Josh said, man, he said, think how different our lives would have been if we had gotten a different result. Well, his statement was kind of akin to the statement that Jessica had made, wow, this would be like if Daddy had died when she was 13. So I'm in my office on Monday, and I get getting fitted for a contraption on my wrist because I just had surgery, and I get a call from Allie. And she said, Mom, when are they supposed to call with my results? To tell you the truth, I had not even thought about it. I hadn't contemplated it. I mean, I got the answer I had needed the Friday before, so I was good. And I said, baby, I don't remember. And she said, well, I said, if you're anxious, give them a call. She said, well, I'll just wait. I said, well, let me know what they say. So I went on about my day doing all the different things I was doing until it's just about time to go home, and I get a call, and it's Josh, and he tells me it's cancer. And I remember exactly where I was in my office, and oddly enough, you've heard Allie say what she did when she heard the news. I did the same thing. I leaned up against the wall, and I fell to the floor, and I stayed there. And I called Joey, and I called Paula, and then I headed to West Monroe. The next day was a Tuesday, and the doctor had set an appointment. So Allie and Josh and I went to Subway, and we talked, she's young, it's a small lump, we probably won't even have to think about even considering MD Anderson, it should all be good. Well, we walked into that doctor's office and quickly learned how wrong we were, because not only because Allie was young and aggressive, the cancer was young and aggressive. And he suggested, as you know, that we go to MD Anderson, and so a decision was made. So the next challenge was to see how fast we could get there, and we were able, through the help of him and others, to get her set for that next Wednesday. So on that Wednesday, who heads out? It's Allie, Josh, and me to MD Anderson. And it was 9 years ago Sunday that we did that, which was October 25th, and it was Josh's 26th birthday. So we get there, and the 3 of us are the first to arrive, and we go on that Wednesday, and we have a test. And it's an ultrasound, and it's during that test that we find out that Allie's cancer has spread. The next day, Josh's parents, everybody else has arrived, and we start test after test. We start off talking about whether or not and how we can preserve Allie's fertility, and in the weeks to come, until we get more tests, and each test is worse and worse and worse, to where that's taken off the table. And I remember looking at that doctor and saying, well, when would you like to start chemo? And she looked me square in the eye and she said, yesterday. That pretty much did it. We were all devastated. We'd gone from figuring out, well, if she has IVF and has multiple kids, can we handle it, to she may never have kids at all. So, or be with us. So Allie began her chemo the next day. And actually the night before, we got one piece of news. It was a bone scan, and it came back clear. And that was the first piece of good news during that whole process. So Allie began her weekly chemo, which involved weekly treks to to Houston. And so Allie, Josh, and I get in the car and we make our treks. We stay with our good friends Tammy and Lance from college. Tammy was Paula's roommate and sorority sister of mine. And we tried to make it kind of as fun trip as much as you can under those circumstances. So there we were, the three amigos. We're doing everything together, right? We're at everything. It never crossed my mind that I would not be at each and every appointment with them. I mean, this was one of my girls, right? I mean, it had always been the three of us together. So imagine how I felt when they broke it to me that they thought they might want to come to a few of the appointments by themselves. I was devastated. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't talk. And for me, that's a lot. But I just sat there and I had to absorb it. And I finally said, well, listen, let me take this in, because I couldn't imagine not being in the same room or the same hospital or the same city or even the same state when all this was going on. But it took a while, and I was finally able to realize that I needed to let them go and do some of this journey on their own. But what I didn't realize was just the struggle that Josh was going through as a husband, trying to be the protector and defender of Allie as his wife. And I really didn't understand the full impact of that until a few months later. It was when Allie had had her mastectomy. She'd had her mastectomy, she'd had the radiation, she'd had her reconstruction. Everything was on track until it wasn't, and plans changed. Her tissue started dying, which required her to have not but one, but two emergency surgeries. So what should have been non-life-threatening procedures all of a sudden became life-threatening and all of a sudden became life-altering, and none of us could do anything about it. Josh was struggling so. I was struggling, and Lord knows, let's not forget about Allie or Jessica, who as her sister wanted to be with her through everything and couldn't because of work. Let me just say this. When someone in a family has cancer, everybody in the family has cancer. It was during all of this process and stress that the close relationship that Josh and I had had before was not there. It was really hard seeing Allie going through all this and not being able to do what I'd like and having to step back and honor their wishes to do this in part, at least by themselves. So I was struggling, and keep in mind, my man that I had gotten the affirmation from, my dad was gone. And Josh, who would normally be there to tell me it's going to be okay and all right, he was the very person I thought didn't even want me around. And I didn't really tell anybody about all this. I didn't tell Joey for a long time because I didn't want anybody to be mad at Josh, because Lord knows he had done nothing for anybody to be mad at him, but they knew I was hurting. So I had to keep that to myself, and I had to trust on God and believe in him and wait for his timing, for the right time for that relationship to be restored. It was a process, and it was a process that took a while, y'all. It took a long while. Many of you know Allie's story. You know that her cancer was triple negative, which means she couldn't take any type of treatment after chemo and radiation, which was bad from the cancer standpoint, but it was great for her wanting to go on and for them to try to have a baby. So they tried the old-fashioned way and through IVF and quickly learned that they were not going to be able to conceive. That bad plan was turned, though, and had them focus on adoption, which led them to be connected with and matched with Genevieve, my first granddaughter, and that happened in December of 2014. So Genevieve was born on March 12th of 2015 in Jacksonville, Florida, which was great, right? The only problem was that on March 11th, the day before, my mother, who was a month shy of being 94, had just been admitted to the hospital in Monroe. So my mom says, no, go. You need to go to Florida. So I trek off with Josh's mama, Renee, and I for the 13-hour trip to Jacksonville. And let me just say, you know the story. And during that process, the time when we were in Jacksonville, we were fighting and praying for this little girl to be able to come and live her life with us. But also, while all this was going on in Jacksonville, we were fighting and praying for Mama to continue to live with us because she was dying. I cannot remember a time when I was more torn of wanting to be in two places at the same time. On Monday, the 17th, our prayers were answered and Genevieve became ours. But since she was going to be crossing state lines, they had to stay with her in Florida for 2 weeks. So our plan had been for me to stay with them for that 2-week period. But that plan had changed. I had to be in Monroe with Mom. So Renee, Josh's mama, agreed to step in, and she changed her plans to come and stay with the kids for the 2 weeks there in Florida. That Monday night, y'all, I remember being by myself in that horrible hotel room with the broken air conditioner and the handicap, so I didn't even have a tub to go soak in, and crying my eyes out for Joey to call and just saying, if I didn't love Renee so much, I would just really hate her because she was getting to stay with my babies and I couldn't. Now, if you know Renee, you can't ever hate Renee. I was just really sad because I wasn't going to get to be there. But those plans changed, allowed me to come back to Monroe and spend the last 2 weeks of my mom's life with her before she died on March 30th. During all of this, Josh and I were getting a letter, but it was a little bit better, but it still wasn't as good as it had been. Life was good. G was great. Liam had been, Liam was already here. I mean, life was good. Comes December, God finds an egg, and Allie gets pregnant. I mean, what could be more exciting? Well, a few weeks later, we get a call. Genevieve's birth mother is pregnant and wants to know if they want to adopt that baby. I mean, there was a unanimous heck yeah from everybody in all of our families. So the crazy part was that my sister-in-law, Libby, had called TLC, the network, about, the rest is history, the show Rattled, and got Allie and Josh on the show. So this baby was going to be born in Louisville, Kentucky. So Allie was due. We all have to pack up and go. So Allie treks up with Josh. They live in an RV. I live in a basement for 2 weeks. It was a crazy time. We all got together. But remember, and the whole reason I told you about all that drama stuff before, a TV show, y'all. I mean, what could be more exciting for me than having my kids and a cameo from time to time on a television show on national TV? I mean, I'm out of control, right? I am so excited, but I had to rein it in. I had to let them be in charge. I had to sit back. I missed out on so much that was going on. I would go in that basement and cry myself to sleep many a night because I was afraid I was missing something or that baby was going to come, and it was really a hard time for me. But during that, and then during that craziness, we all ended up getting to live together, which was awesome, for 6 weeks with Renee and Terry coming in and out and all of us there together, and the Vera being born and all the drama with Lydia that was similar to what happened with Genevieve, but then having that little girl be ours. It was all that craziness during all of that would have seemed so devastating and so different than anything that we had planned, that my relationship with Josh was restored. It wasn't long after we got home, Josh sat me down and he apologized to me for telling me not to be myself and how he had responded to me over the years. He talked about how so much he had struggled during the process from the minute that Allie had been diagnosed, and that he promised me he would never again tell me or ask me to not be excited and not be supportive because they knew that they had no bigger fan than I was, and that he would never do that again. Keep in mind, y'all, this was in August of 2016, 4 years after Allie's failed surgeries. I am thankful to say that my Allie is healed and whole, and that I'm thankful to God for not only bringing her back to me, but Josh as well. And I can truthfully say that Josh and I have never been closer, and I believe it's in large part to the experience that we had to go through together. But as I say this tonight, please know that I am so mindful and aware of people that have not experienced that miracle that we did. I know that there are people that have lost loved ones to cancer, to other illnesses, or broken relationships, accidents. And let me be quick to say that I don't know why. I don't know why some are healed. I don't know why some are and why some are not. But that brings me back to my conversation with Harry at Nancy's funeral, the aunt trying to understand the computer. It's not going to happen. I know in my heart of heart that God could have intervened in Fred's accident, that Fred could have done something, looked differently, the other gentleman could have reacted or responded differently. He could have, but he didn't. I don't understand why, and I won't in this lifetime. In December of 2018, Fred's mama and his stepfather, my children's grandparents, and the only mother-in-law and father-in-law that I had from Fred, died within 6 hours of each other from two totally unrelated things in their 70s, totally something that you would not expect. And it was in December of 2018. Every year I write a Christmas letter So it was right at the time. I needed to get the letter written, and I was struggling about what to do or what to say. I was able to pull it together, and I think I can't say it better than I did in the letter, so I'm just going to read you what I wrote. So we're still trying to wrap our heads around everything. This is where I've had to go back and reflect again on what I have preached in the past. I've always said that we live in an imperfect world with imperfect people and imperfect bodies. This is not heaven. As long as that is the case, there will be sickness and accidents and bad things will happen. I don't know why sometimes they result in tragedy and sometimes they don't, and I may never know, but this is what I do know. While God knows all things, he doesn't cause all things, but God causes all things, even bad, tragic things, to work together for good for those who love him. And I don't just say that because I have read it and I believe it or somebody told me. I say I know it because I have seen it. I have seen broken-hearted girls move from a different place after losing their daddy to meet and marry men who would love them incredibly, who are wonderful husbands and fathers whom they would not have met otherwise. I have seen my youngest daughter and her husband battle cancer that Satan and the world would have expected to cripple them, only to have God work that for good by providing opportunities for them to reach others and giving us our incredible granddaughters who we would never have been able to have ours. I have seen two families brought together following incredible losses in their lives. While these good things do not change the fact that we love and miss so dearly those we have lost or hate the bad things that took place, we don't have the ability to change what has happened. But with God's help, we can work them together for good. So remember, quote, "For I bring you good tidings of great joy," end quote. My entire life, I was taught and had been told, and I have always told my girls, that we can't control or change what happens to us. The only thing that we control is how we respond to it. Joy is a choice, and every day we have the opportunity to make a choice, to choose joy or not. With God's help and direction, I've been able to choose joy, and I choose joy. Thank you all.
Thank you, Miss Sid. We can't say that enough, and how much you've been blessing us with your story. I want to say to everybody here as we kind of wrap up, if God has spoken to you and is stirring in your heart and you feel the need to do something about that, I'm going to hang out up here in the front. We can get some of our guys up here, and we'd love the chance to work that out with you. I want to pray for us. And then we're going to take a break, and then Blake's going to come back and lead us in some worship for another, 5 or 6. Oh, no, he's cutting out. Okay. Now we'll just, we'll end in worship. No. Let's pray together. Father, we thank you so much for just the blessing of how you write a story that blesses us. And I pray that, whatever we're struggling through to understand or to, these goals and dreams that we have, that we would lay those in your hands and that we would trust you with it. And I pray that you would, lift our eyes to you and that we would keep them on you for all of our days. And thank you for loving us and just continuing to pour out your blessing. We pray this in Jesus' name. Amen. Thank y'all for being here.